Hey, what's going on, everybody? Matty A here with the Six Figure Flipper, and welcome to today's training on good old direct mail. Direct mail is a very ancient strategy in the world of real estate investing lead generation, and it's really one of the most effective ways for getting in direct contact with the seller, which obviously has many advantages to directly negotiating one-to-one without a third party in the mix. It gives you the ability to generate deeper discounts. It gives you the ability to really narrow in on their motivation, identify the win-win, and provide solutions. And direct mail is one of those vehicles or one of those channels that you can use for accessing motivated sellers off market. So today we're going to run through the direct mail roadmap. And really, there's a handful of things that you're going to want to take into account when you're mapping out your direct mail campaign. And I just want to preface something before we go into this is, direct mail is a strategy that is not a one and done. If you really want to know what works, if you want to get the highest conversion rates, if you want to get the most ROI on your invested dollars into your campaign, you have to follow through with the entire sequence. And what I mean by that is multiple touches. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We're not going to go in extreme detail of what to send, when to send it, and all of that. But this is going to be a high-level overview of how you can set up your direct mail system and get the most out of it depending on your unique situation. So first and foremost, you want to know what you actually want to accomplish from your direct mail campaign, right? You need to know how you're going to measure whether it was a success or not. So some people may say, hey, I want to get a certain amount of calls from my direct mail campaign. Others may say, I want to get a certain amount of deals from my direct campaign. Others may say, I want a certain amount of revenue from my direct mail campaign. So based on what is a success for you and what you're measuring it against, then we can reverse engineer based on the stats and the studies behind direct mail, what kind of campaign you may need to send, how often you may need to send it, how much money you might need to spend, or how big your list may need to be. But if we don't know where we're going and what the end goal is, then we don't really know how to be most effective and efficient with backing into a strategy for achieving that goal, right? So what is the direct mail campaign for? And once you have a better idea of that, then you can figure out what is your budget, right? So you want to determine how much are you actually willing to spend on your marketing lists, whether that's a software that's providing it for you, whether it's a list provider, website or service. You want to know how much you are willing to spend on that list, right? Because you're going to have your list expense if you're buying from one of these companies who scrape data and they get the most accurate information that they possibly can in regards to the specific mailing list that you want, whether it's divorce, whether it's probate, whether it's inherited properties, tax liens, whatever it may be. They will scrape this information, get that all aggregated for you, and then they'll sell you this data for a certain amount, right? And each list varies depending on size, depending on how hard it was to gather the information. What I do want to preface is just know that all of these companies, all of these services have the same exact information that you and I have. So this is all public information. They've just gotten really good through either softwares or through relationships that they've built to getting this information that the general public generally does not have the ability to do so as easily. So how much are you willing to spend on your lists, right? And obviously that's going to depend on how big the list is going to be. Also, how much are you willing to spend on production costs, right? The cost to design your postcard, or the cost to design a mailer, or the cost to write the copy on that stuff. If you want to do all that yourself, rock on. That saves you a little bit of money, but that's something to take into account when mapping out your entire budget, right? And then the actual cost to print these and fulfill them, and who is going to be doing that? Those are things that you're going to have to take into account. And so that's why it's good to get in the mindset and thinking in regards to how long this campaign is actually going to be. Most people just plan and budget for that first mailing piece. But what you realistically should be doing is treating this like an entire campaign. So mapping this entire, whether it's, a 6-month campaign and you're going to send them one piece every single month, or if you're going to send them, 2 pieces every month over 3 months, or whatever it may be, we want to map out the budget to have a list for an entire 6 months, what we're going to be sending them over those 6 months, how much it's going to cost to fulfill and get those sent out over the next 6 months. So these are all things that you're going to want to take into account up front, so that way you can earmark those funds ahead of time instead of getting, a third of the way into your mailing campaign, maybe not seeing the exact results that you desired to see yet, and then you scrap it. And that's just wasted marketing dollars, and we don't want that. We want to test and make sure that we can actually measure what kind of data and results are coming in, so we can figure out what's working and what's not, and we can determine whether we want to scale up or scale down moving forward. So what's your budget look like? Number 3 is something that you're definitely going to want to really take into account, which is, who are you targeting, right? Obviously, it's going to be motivated sellers, someone who's willing to have a conversation with you regarding selling their house off market for cash, maybe for a discount, right? But you got to identify who this person is so you can identify some other things that are important in regards to increasing your conversions. So how are you going to identify these people, right? Is this going to be a list of people that just faced divorce? Is it going to be a list of people that, inherited a property from someone that passed away, or the house is going through probate? Is it someone who's facing foreclosure, maybe financial hardship, bankruptcy, maybe they're in a notice of default situation where their house may be going to sale soon? By knowing who you're targeting, we can better determine what their motivation is. And this is extremely, extremely important, because if we don't understand what their motivation is or what their pain is, then we are not going to be able to strategically connect with them and point out the solutions and services that we can provide to really alleviate that pain, right? So that's where it becomes extremely important to know who is your target audience, because you're not going to send a specific mailing piece with a specific call to action for someone that's going through divorce versus someone that is facing, a financial hardship, or maybe they just lost a family member. Those are 2 different audiences, which therefore would be 2 different call to actions and 2 different mailing pieces. So we got to know who we're targeting, therefore we can understand what their motivation is, narrow in on that, and make sure that through the pieces that we're sending them, we can actually utilize the right call to actions, which will increase our chances of getting them to call us, right? And that's really all direct mail is here to do, is for the phone to start ringing and for us to have the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody. And then it becomes up to us, right? Direct mail did its job. Now it becomes up to us to close the individual and further that opportunity. So what marketing materials are you going to use now that you have a better idea of who you're targeting and what their motivation is? Then we can better understand what we're actually going to send them. So I always recommend, when you're first starting out, whether your list size is 100 or 10,000, sending a postcard is always a cheap and effective way of testing your list. It's an effective way of scraping your list. So on that list, there's not going to be 100 out of 100 names that are 100% accurate. So, the list providers do their best to get you the information that is most up to date, but it's just not the case. So a quick way of testing how accurate your list is by sending out a postcard. And why I say a postcard is, one, it's still effective and it has the same messages on there, but it's basically a fraction of the cost to send out a professional mailer or letter. So anything, ranging from 40 to 60 cents on a postcard is a lot different than 90 to, $1.50 for a professional letter that's being sent out. So this is a good way to scrape your list, and you're going to get either return to senders right? And you're going to go back through your list and you're going to take all the names off that don't have, the accurate mailing address. So you're not going to want to waste any more marketing dollars sending to them because there's just no way of getting their correct or more up-to-date mailing information unless you decide to skip trace them, which is a whole nother conversation. But for the context of this, postcard, scrape your list, update your list. Then you're going to get some people that probably say, hey, take me off your list, or how'd you get my information? You can update that as well. And then the next step you're going to want to take is determining sending them an actual true letter, whether that's a yellow letter, whether that is a professional letter with your logo and everything on it. Whichever you decide to do, the professional letter has a little bit more of an increased conversion rate for getting calls. So that's going to be your second touch. And now that's going to cost a little bit more. But we've seen things like, instead of doing, the bulk postage and the bulk stamp and the labels, and it really feels like spam, by hand addressing envelopes, hand addressing the return to sender, doing a forever stamp, certain things like that, you increase your ability to get somebody to open the letter and call you, right? And that's, like I said, all we want them to do. So through many years of testing, through lots of wasted marketing dollars, which really isn't wasted because we've narrowed down what actually works, then you can determine that at the end of the day, if it smells like bulk mail, if it feels like bulk mail, tastes like bulk mail, whatever you want to say, bulk mail, what do you do with it? You stand over your trash can, you don't even think about opening it, you just drop it in, right? So anything that's handwritten, anything that has a forever stamp, anything that feels somewhat customized or personalized to that individual will be intriguing enough to have them to open it. And that's what we want. So understanding what you're going to send them is important. Postcard, yellow letter, professional letterhead, hand addressed versus printed, bulk postage versus forever stamp. All things that you want to take into consideration based on the sequence of where you're actually sending them and who you're actually sending them to. And we go over a lot more of this in detail and the science behind it and the actual sequences inside the Six Figure Flipper. But this is just an overall, generic approach to some of the ways and some of the things that you can send and how you would send it. So once you send these out, how are you going to track those results, right? These are all things that you need to think out ahead of time so you're not scrambling on the back end when you start getting all these calls. So how are you actually going to field the calls, right? Is it going to be a call center that you can pay, or is it going to be coming directly to your phone? Is it going to be coming to a line that, is a Google Voice and it transfers over? Are you going to give them your cell phone? Are you going to send it to, a virtual assistant in the Philippines? These are all things that you want to take into account ahead of time. And based on your business, based on your resources, based on your time and energy, it will all vary, right? So just things to consider. And when you are fielding the calls, how are you going to actually intake the leads? What's your system, right? We have a specific sheet that we want to make sure we get all of this information answered because, one, it's going to help us identify their motivation. It's going to help us gather all the necessary research and, specifics regarding the property, their motivation, their situation. That way we better know how to navigate the conversation, what solutions to provide them with, and what our next steps are based on what services we actually want to offer them. So how are you going to intake it? And then where does it go from there? And how do you actually keep this data accurate and up to date, updating your lists, but also, inputting what we have is your direct mail tracker spreadsheet, which allows us to identify the lists that we send to, the actual amount of calls that we're getting back, the appointments that we're setting, the appointments that turn into offers, the offers that turn into contracts, the contracts that turn into closed business and eventual revenue. And then based on how much money we put into that particular campaign and how much money we generated and revenue we generated from that campaign, what our return on investment is, right? So you cannot manage what you don't measure. And if you are spending $5,000 to get $500,000 in revenue, do you think that would be a return on investment that would be worthwhile and that you would want to know about? Absolutely. Or vice versa, if you're spending $50,000 and you're only making one flip that generates you $25,000 in profit, That's where we can track the results and make true educated decisions based on what makes investment sense. This is a black and white game, right? So we want to make sure that we're not playing in the gray area. We're not getting sucked in, with emotion, and we're making true educated decisions based on data. And that's what business and the scorecard of business is based on, is the data, right? The numbers don't lie to us. So we want to make sure that we are tracking our results and that we're giving ourselves the opportunity to make the most educated decisions for ourselves and for our business. So once you get the lead, once you intake it and you start, kind of working through the process of what the next steps are, what is the follow-up? What is the process that you're going to follow, and how are you going to get these things out? Two things that you're going to want to take into account are going to be whether or not you decide to have a fulfillment service or whether you do this yourself. And this is a conversation that we always like to have on the front end, because if you don't have the time and energy to do a lot of this stuff, then it might make more sense to pay a little more, but know that a fulfillment company is doing this in the background while you're fielding all the leads. This individual or this company is consistently sending out the campaigns as they need to be sent out. So that way there's no lull in your marketing system, and it's happening effectively over the 6-month or the 12-month or however long campaign you have it done. So as you start taking the leads in, you're going to get busy trying to keep up with these things. You want to make sure that you have a system, a marketing process that you can follow that's happening behind the scenes to keep these mailers or keep these direct touches going out to generate more and more leads. So how are you going to follow up, right? And I talked a little bit about the single touch versus the multi-touch. I always recommend multi-touch, except in specific circumstances or scenarios, depending on the list or the individual, which is another conversation, but it is something to take into account. And then another way for following up and getting in touch with these people is skip tracing them. So taking your list, and obviously you're using this list to mail out, but also taking your list and skip tracing that list. And what skip tracing does is it allows you and these websites or companies that you will pay to have a skip trace done to find the most up-to-date and accurate information on that individual. So hopefully what the information will provide will be their most accurate and up-to-date mailing address, which you should already have. Hopefully it'll provide something to do with an email address, with some phone numbers. And these are different ways that you can add in other layers to your direct mail system to increase your likeliness of conversion and or just getting a conversation started. So what we would do or recommend doing is, after you send the mailing piece, and if you had their information, give them a phone call and just say, hey, blah, blah, blah. My name is Matt Aitchison with X investment property, and we are currently looking to buy more properties in your neighborhood. Yours happened to pop up on our radar, and you probably got a direct mail piece from us this last week. I just wanted to make sure you got it okay, and also ask, is there any questions that you might have, or are you interested in taking or receiving a cash offer on your property and selling in the next 6 months, and seeing what they say. So another way to touch them, right? Which is through the phone call, or there's other services like Sly Text and Sly Broadcast where you can text people, where you can drop voicemails. And these are easy leveraged ways, like I said, different channels of communication that you can reach out to people. And these are great ways that we've seen the increase in conversion become more effective and go up because of these additional touches or additional efforts to reach out to that person. So you can do the text or the phone call. You can also do email, which we recommend getting them in some kind of email drip campaign and creating different campaigns based on, like I said, the list. You're not going to put someone in an email campaign and talk about, calling to action around taking care of a problematic property for an out-of-state landlord versus someone who just had a family member pass away, right? Two different individuals, two different emails, two different sequences, but things to take into account. This is another way that you can touch somebody on your direct mail list and take this follow-up through much deeper and much further than your competition is going to be doing. I can promise you that. If you go past a single touch or maybe even a 2-touch campaign, you're going to separate yourself from your competition. And that's what is going to be so key, especially when people are, if your market is saturated with a lot of people doing direct mail, how do you stand out? Well, this is how you stand out. Following a system and going deep into the system, you will become relevant. And when the time is right, when they are motivated, you will be the person that they're most likely going to call because you stuck out from the other 50 mailers that they got because of the postcard, because of the voicemail, because of the text, the door knock, the email, whatever you decide to do in your follow-up system. Okay? And so as you go through this follow-up system and you map out your entire mailing campaign, we want to get this schedule organized. So it becomes clockwork and you know what you're supposed to do, when to do it, what to send out, what to say, and that way it becomes a system and it's clear, and now it all comes down to just executing, right? Executing, committing mentally and physically to the process, saying, I'm going to do this 6-month campaign. I've allotted X amount of time for it. I've allotted X amount of dollars for it. I got all of my mailers mapped out. I got all of my emails mapped out. I have all of my systems mapped out. And now I'm going to just let it play out, and I'm going to collect data, and I'm going to determine, based on that data, where I can improve, what I need to scrap, and what I can do to optimize this moving forward. And that's really a very broad and easy overview of what a direct mail roadmap can look like for you. Based on your time, your market, your energy, and your resources, utilize this framework to create your own direct mail marketing system. So as we wrap up, some creative principles to keep in mind as you are mapping out your direct mail system is copy and text trumps looking pretty. So I know there's a lot of people that, want to make their postcard or make their mailing or whatever it may be look super pretty. Just know that what's in the context and the content is more important than how it looks. Okay, so yes, it does help a little bit, but it's more important in how it looks. More important in what it says than how it looks. Number 2 is use a friendly conversational tone, display empathy, and use this opportunity to make a good first impression and build rapport. I can't tell you how many people call me saying, I get 30 of these mailers every single week, and for some reason, I just wanted to call yours. And I always ask them, well, why is that? And they say, well, it just wasn't very salesy. And it made me feel like you were a human being, right? And at the end of the day, we're all human beings having a human experience, and we want to work with people we know, like, and trust. And when you're dealing with this situation, oftentimes that people are dealing with that we're mailing, they're going to be a little resistant, a little skeptical. So the more friendly you can come off, the more empathetic you can be, and the more rapport you can build through those opportunities, take them. Number 3 is keep it simple, right? I always like the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. I think that less is always more in this situation, and you could sit here and you could map out and give them tons and tons of information and education through your mailer, which is what I see a lot of people do. But what you want to do is you want to keep it simple enough to where it hits on their pain point, it narrows in on their motivation, you have a strategic call to action, and you give them something that is enough to chew on, but not enough to satisfy them so that they will call you. You want them to call you. You don't want to give them all the information in the mailer, right? You want them to call you. You want them to ask for more information or get more questions answered. Therefore, less is always more in this situation. Number 4, be credible and build trust. If you can add in testimonials, if you can add in, success stories or something along those lines, those always go far, knowing that other people have done business with you, have had a good experience, and that you have, 1, just helped them solve their problem, and 2, done it in a way that they are proud enough to give you a testimonial and share that with the next person that may do business with you, right? So be credible and build trust. The last one is highlight their pain, their motivation, and how you can help. Very, very important. You want to make sure that you are highlighting what their pain may be, right? If it's an out-of-state landlord, tired of taking tenant calls, changing toilets, and never cash flowing each and every month, or a headache from out of state, or right? That's motivating, identifying their motivation. Next is going to be, better understanding their motivation. You can further provide a specific call to action and how you can help, what that solution is. Call me because X, right? What is your unique value proposition? Most people and investors are going to have the same one. We buy cash as is, close on your time frame without any real estate commissions. We pay all the closing costs. Whatever your unique value proposition is, just make sure that you display that so that they know how you can help them and why it may be an advantage. So 5 creative principles. Make sure you keep these in mind when creating your marketing materials. Last, 3 critical elements of your direct mail campaign to recap. What are they? Well, the 3 critical elements of your direct mail campaign are going to be 1, your list, right? Making sure that you have a quality list, making sure that it's accurate and as up to date as it can possibly be, because that's an important part of this process, and you definitely don't want to be wasting your time and your money mailing to a bad list. Number 2 is going to be strategic call to action. You got to make sure that you have a call to action in there that really moves them to actually take action, right? So having something that is strategic, thought out, and aligned with your list and the avatar or the motivated seller on that list, strategic call to action is key. And then third is your follow-up system. So making sure that you are exhausting all efforts, all resources to actually enhance your ability to convert that lead. And how you're going to do that, the gold, the money, it's all in the follow-up. Oftentimes, rarely are you ever going to get somebody that's going to be raising their hand, running over to the phone and saying, I am so happy you sent me this mailer. I've been waiting for someone like you to buy my house for cash and, flip it for a profit and help me get out of my situation, right? Never. It doesn't happen that way. So you got to make sure through your follow-up system, you're giving yourself the best chance to catch that person at the right time through the right communication medium. And that's where the follow-up system is key, based on your list, based on your strategic call to action, and then how do you follow up and continue to take that through the entire process. So that is all I have for you guys on direct mail. And I just want to remind you that there are so many different direct mailing strategies and systems and, marketing materials. And just know that the one that works is going to be one that you use and you execute on at a high level, right? They all work in some capacity, but you got to make sure that you take these things into account ahead of time before you're setting these systems up to get the most out of it. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that you're getting a return on your investment and a return on your time so you can duplicate this system, scale this system, and really know what works for your business. But I can promise you direct mail is not dead. And if you want to know more of the strategies and some of the trainings and real in-depth side of direct mail marketing, you can check more out at sixfigureflipper.com and what we talk about inside the Six Figure Flipper course and group. So until next time, I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I will see you on the flip side.